I'd like to ask you one question, if I may.
Yeah, please.
The traditional meaning of karma.
Okay.
Just remind me what that means to you. Would be great.
Karma, very simply put in a Western way, is nothing but the cause and effect. What you sow, you reap. A combination of good things you sow, good things you reap. And the combination of bad things you sow, bad things you reap. So karma is nothing but an output of what you do over a period of time. Something happens today, something happens later. Even if you don't believe in rebirths and all that, even within this life, if I have good karma that I have done with Abraham, he has connected me with you. So it's the cause and effect of my input with Mr. Abraham, which has helped me to feel that, maybe make him feel that it's worth that I talk to a gentleman like you. So that is good karma.
That is good karma. Yeah. So there's good karma and bad karma. And that's a duality in itself.
Yes. And
where does that from your point of view, if we are all one?
If we are all one in the real sense,
yes.
Today we are fragmented. No, we are really not one. Countries are divided. People are divided on caste, religion, social status. The idea of being one is there. But are we there is a question. We are still work in progress.
It's definitely still a work in progress, isn't it?
Very, very slow.
And the only reason that I'm here talking to you is I'm old enough to feel that if I don't, maybe I never will.
In a way, yes.
You know, I mean, as a younger man, if I was invited to speak with you, because you're quite evidently a special soul, you're extremely close to source, and you have worked very hard to get there. And we could wear that with a badge of pride of honor, but that's not something that we do with that, is it? It's something that we've traveled to. We don't celebrate getting to London particularly, but we have to travel to London sometimes. It's what we do in London that really matters. And that's, I guess, if I was a younger man, I wouldn't think like that. I didn't think like that. I went to London because London was pulling me there. I wasn't pushing myself to London to do something. I was being pulled there to join in what was already happening without question. And so, yeah, that's my younger self. Now I find myself 31 years here, away from London. And I talk about London in those terms because anywhere outside London is a different place. Almost a different country. But the country is run from that city. So I felt that I had a duty, in a sense, to join in. But if I went back to my younger self, I'd probably say, you have a duty to yourself to understand what it is and how you might improve it. But it's so big. How on earth can one person, she, he, or anywhere in between, she and he, how can one person do that? It's almost impossible. And then I came to Tokyo I set myself another sort of task. Well, actually, my dear darling lady wife encouraged me to come and investigate her city. And I was faced with a city that was even larger and more complex. Yeah, and I'm still learning. And the human condition is all around me. There are different flavors of the human condition here. It's completely different to the West. And so in that space of calmness and tranquility, because I can walk down a street and not understand any interactions unless I really force myself to listen to the Japanese. Whereas if I'm walking down the street in London and there is an argument over here, I'm inside that argument instantaneously. So yeah, I'm fortunate to have had the chance to live in a little space of quiet and be forced to look back at what was and where I came from, and also absorb the news from both London and the United States, the West per se, and have an opinion based on a neutral position. Because none of my worldly wealth is attached to those places anymore. I completely extracted myself from that. Yeah, I based my worldly wealth on the work that I do here. Which is, it's kind of international. It's getting more international now, but yeah, it's been a quiet place. So I've been fortunate. So karma for me wasn't very real. But after 2020, I certainly have a strong feeling that it is, because within the confines of 2020, where we were all stripped to nothing, we had to self-center, go back to who we were or who we are, and then build from that center. And I think the biggest part of that center, I used to think the brain was everything. And when I was having conversations with my friends on social media, because nearly all of my interactions from Japan in English are on social media, either Facebook or LinkedIn or TikTok or Twitter or yeah, but mainly LinkedIn and Facebook. They're grounded places, and there are some interesting groups on Facebook that have never been created anywhere on the planet before, in terms of people that are interested to listen can go, and people that are interested to teach per se, their experience over an extended period of time within those groups, with inspirational posts, with messages, with images, and images are extremely powerful. So that's where I segued long time ago, 2017, into putting some of my thoughts down in images. So I continue to do that.
Wonderful. I'll start following your pages now.
Well, actually, my TikTok page is not really for minors' consumption. Some of the things that are up there are a little raw, should we say. Nothing sexual, but in terms of looking at our human body and the dimensions of that, and indeed how the morphology of our human body fits with the patterns that have been handed down to us, the ancient archetypes across all thought, and many of those originating from original writings in the Vedas that you spoke about.
Yeah. So when you spoke about old age and karma, I was reminded of the 4 segments of life that Indian scriptures speak about. Brahmacharya, when you're born until you sort of get married at the age of 20, 25. The second stage is called a samsara, where you actually live the life of a householder, do all your duties up to the age of 55, 60, whatever. And then the third stage of life, where we called as sannyasa, where you sort of renunciate and start moving towards accepting old age as it is. And the last stage, what is called as vanaprastha or vanaprastha, where you go in search of the ultimate or your life's purpose into the forest, or you just silently retire. And when you said you are in the other end, I was reminded of these 4 buckets of life that Indian scriptures speak about. And karma plays a huge...
Which part would I be in?
Sannyasa, maybe the third one. Vanaprastha is when you give up everything and move out completely. You detach yourself and you leave everything and go in search of whatever you want to search. The ultimate peace, whatever.
Yeah, that's a brave move. You have to be divorced from your responsibilities in a pleasant manner prior.
Exactly.
Money happens to be a route to that. I guess if you look at Maslow's triangle, the top tier of self-actualization.
Yes.
Yeah, everyone's searching for that within the bounds of getting enough water first.
Correct.
And then enough food, and then getting away from water, shelter.
Yeah.
It's funny that, isn't it? We need water first and food, and then we need to run away from water and find shelter.
Whereas Indian yogi scriptures say that merge all the 4 and live all 4 phases of the life at every part of life, so that you are there, but you are not there. Something like what Buddha says, renunciate while you are still there. You don't need to run away physically. You can detach yourself mentally. This is what Lord Krishna says in Gita. Maybe that's what I talk about in spiritual CEO as well. Where as a CEO, you are detached from the results, not from the efforts. Do the best, because every CEO in this world did their best before pandemic hit. None of us could predict the impact of the pandemic. Some of us could predict the coming of the virus, but I don't think the world saw what was happening, what was going to happen. And there, I think being detached from the results, what Bhagavad Gita says, is a very valid concept in this current scenario, at least. Otherwise, we go really mentally off balance.
Yes. Yeah, it's definitely a high wire act for every human being human. And the lessons that we learn in periods where we lose ourselves are extremely valuable, grounding, teaching.
Humbling.
Yes. And fortunately, at this point in time, I'm a little away from 2020. I'm in 2021, and I made personal decision to manifest a better 2021 for myself and my family.
Wonderful. It's really wonderful.
And it happened. So, and it has momentum. And I'm very carefully steering that momentum. And it requires, like you say, it requires remembering where I was last year. Each and every day.
Yes.
Because now I'm wrapped up in business. We're back into the language of business, where every interaction is cut short to the point of business, and the commercial mechanism or the information about the service or the underlying product that provides the service Mostly services now. We're all focused on trying to disconnect services from physical things.
Yes.
And that's an ongoing task.
Okay.
And this is an example. This conversation is disconnected from the physical airplane that would have carried me to India, or the airplane that would have carried you to Tokyo. It's disconnected from the hotel that would have nourished you and kept you well prior to the meeting, and looked after you after the meeting. And the meeting is a tiny little fraction of all of that economic expenditure.
Correct.
But here we are enjoying the benefits of a video call, be it a Teams call, be it Zoom. Thank you, Zoom, for this one.
The world has shrunk.
Actually, what has shrunk is the distaste that many had prior to reaching out to people on video, because it is a different mechanism. The distaste that other people had in the past for actually agreeing to join a call prior to actually being able to ascertain the person in other ways, in physical ways. A pre-meeting before a business meeting, perhaps, and then the business meeting is cancelled because there's no point. The sifting, the weeding, the chaff. Every single business person that I have interfaced with on LinkedIn prior to the pandemic would institute an instant jump to email and some form of due diligence on who you were before agreeing to, I'll introduce you to my team, and they'll find out whether it's worth me meeting you. And that's an unwritten thing, an unsaid thing, but that now has withered away, because the person themselves is the imprimatur of their own network and relationships directly on these social networks. And if they are not actively involved in nurturing them and taking further risks, then they will never grow the real relationships that they feel are real. And typically for a CEO, the real relationships are those that are the most rapid route to business, to revenue, to partnerships, those ideals. However, I think that there is a window of opportunity because of the changes that we've seen with the pandemic to a certain greater sense of Ceylon. And I'll explain that because it's not called Ceylon now, is it?
Sri Lanka.
Yeah, but before it was called Ceylon, it was called
up to 1960s.
Serendipity. Serendipity.
I remember that book one British author wrote. It's titled Serendipity.
Was it called The Islands of Seren? And then serendipity came from that.
Yes.
So you can confuse somebody if you want to play word games and say, it was so Ceylon. And they'll say, no, Sri Lanka. Oh, I'm sorry, Seren. But the serendipity of those interactions that are happening much more rapidly, because remember, the planes have gone, the hotels have gone. So what has happened? The opportunity for frequency of interaction has increased.
The new normal.
It's the new normal. And I guess I'm very interested to learn more about corporate karma and the meaning of that. But I noticed you sent me a sheet that is very important. I understand.
No, it is fine. We have already started. We have jumped in. We'll continue. We are already halfway through, so we don't need to start all over again. We'll continue because there are a lot of interesting sound bites we have picked up. So very interesting.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, well, these are feelings that come from 2020.
We just need, if possible, just to set the record straight, couple of lines about you so it goes on record, nothing else. Everything else, we are doing it fine. It just needs a small introduction about you, or whatever you want to say about you. We'll continue with that.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm British, as you can see from the flag behind me.
Yeah.
But I'm in Japan, near Tokyo. I'm a British father of 3 Japanese sons and 2 Japanese grandsons. I've been in Tokyo for 31 years.
Great.
Coming up to 32. So I've been in a situation where I've been in a cross-cultural nexus and have been observing my home country for many years.
Okay.
And that gives you certain insights. I believe one day perhaps I'll write a book as good as The Spiritual CEO.
You should. Cross-cultural books are really in demand, worldwide.
Yep.
Specifically with Indo-Japanese English kind of a mix, it would make a good read, very good read indeed.
I think it may well do. And if I do get the time away from business, I'll do that. But I do love my business. I've been in the business of transmitting raw emotion from people to people using the mechanism of television for many, many years. But other people would say I'm a broadcast infrastructure expert. And the broadcast infrastructures are changing rapidly now because people want to experience things that are happening in distant places but can't travel.
Yeah.
So my business is booming, and that's very good for me and for everyone around our business, which is great.
Good. Last few months of pandemic, I have seen many countries through the virtual tours on TV.
Yes, yeah. And we have a massive library of human endeavor on YouTube, which has democratized information in many ways in a powerful way. You can actually see someone do something that could not be written very easily.
Exactly.
So the visual field of video is a training tool, it's an education tool, it's an enlightenment tool. It may well help us decide where best to spend our time after this non-sentient RNA decides to leave us.
Or decides to mutate itself into something else, God knows.
You said it, the last part of your sentence was perfect.
God knows.
Yes, sir.
So going to the corporate karma, it is something that I've been studying mainly because I'm a meditator for about 30 years. And coming from a very strong Indian background, having grown up with an extensive read of Indian mythology and stuff like that. After all, each human being is conditioned by the circumstances in which they are brought up. So the karmic equation, or the karmic balance as we call, or today I prefer to call it as KQ, or karma quotient. See, 78 years back, IQ, or intelligence quotient, was still coming up, and initially there was a lot of resistance in people accepting it. Then later it became the only tool for hiring people in many organizations. If you are smart, if you're intelligent, you are picked up, otherwise you are not. And in 1980s came the works of Daniel Goleman, speaking about EQ, emotional intelligence, and things like that. And all mid-level, top-level leaders were hired based on their ability to have a combination of both IQ and EQ, emotional quotient. And mid-90s saw a lot of research by Harvard and several business schools, which proved the importance of compassion, mercy, humility, factors which were never considered earlier essential for a leader. The only reason a leader existed was to make profits for the organization, nothing else. He could fleece people, he could do anything he wants as long as the balance sheet and profit and loss account kept getting better. And spiritual quotient, when they speak about specifically the work of the Dalai Lama, the Bhutanese Buddhist principles of compassion, mercy, even what Christ taught, being compassionate to people. And this led to SQ or spiritual quotient to come up, where not only your IQ and EQ was measured, even your ability to forgive, accept people for what they are, and things like that initially was taboo, but subsequently was accepted. But in my study that I found that all these three things being important, one thing which yet the business hasn't come to accept, though they do understand these days, is the importance of the karmic equation that the organization has. We all believe that what we are today is because of what we did in the past. Either you take a missile which was programmed to land here, today I and you are talking, something has happened in the past which has made this happen. In Western mind, we call it the cause and effect. As I mentioned in the beginning of the interview, I knew Mr. Abraham and you knew Mr. Abraham, and something happened where today we are juxtaposed and sitting together and talking in front of the screen. The cause happened and the effect is what we see. And what we are causing today will create an effect tomorrow, day after, 1 year from now. Either this conversation or the book that we are discussing about or your experiences. Karmic quotient or corporate karma is about what people bring to the table in terms of their attitudes, beliefs, belief systems, and the role of a CEO, where, for example, in this book, though it's yet to reach you, I'll see that when Japanese market opens up through Amazon, who have done this book, I'll get a book for you, or a Kindle version at least. See, I even speak about mythological connections where, even for example, a leader makes someone angry or upset, one of his subordinates, and the person literally curses you. It is called what we in Indian parlance, we call it as a ripple effect. The emotions with which a person sort of hates you or curses you has an impact. After all, this is what has created the great religious divide, the great divides along caste and community and things like that, because people started developing thought patterns based on their belief systems, and that converted into action. Very simply put, karmic equations are where people's belief systems, if it's not altered to work towards a common cause, they tend to impact business decisions. Even your ability to discriminate when, you see, after all, decision making is about choices. For example, you are the CEO of a company. There are three subordinates working for you, say A, B, and C. If A, B, and C bring something to you, just because you like C more than A and B, you are influenced by what C says, though A and B may be telling you something which is more meritorious. In spite of that, because of my connection with C or my prejudice in a positive way towards C, I overrule A and B and go ahead with C. So in a way, the role of a CEO here, if you really see, is about making choices and how the equations from the past influences these choices, which can impact the future of the organization. And karma does have an effect because in India, at least, we believe that there are at least about 50 to 100 people who are continuously impacting what you think and do. For example, whether you like it or not, your children, your grandchildren, your wife, they will have an impact on what you think, though we may not admit. The same happens in a corporate environment. And the people who, for example, in a political system, the boss is surrounded by people who don't bring good thinking to the table. He is going to be influenced over a period of time. even if you have to dig back and find out some of the atrocities, human atrocities that have been committed by so-called leaders, whether it's Hitler or Mussolini or whoever, they were influenced by a bunch of people. I don't think none of them decided to do whatever they do on their own. They were influenced by events, they're influenced by a few people around. And these thoughts and patterns form the corporate karmic equation. And if the CEO is not careful, the trajectory of the missile, which is the growth of the organization, can be seriously altered. A wrongly launched rocket can hit the sea very easily. A properly launched rocket will surely move into the space and the payload is left in the orbit for it to do whatever it's supposed to do. I'm giving you a very simplistic definition, but like the movie Matrix, this is a little bit more complex. But all I can say is you bring good seeds to the soil. In all probability, the chances of a good crop coming out are more. But if you put bad seeds, boiled seeds, rotten seeds, weeds, you sort of plant weeds and expect it to give you a mango tree, it's not going to happen. So fundamentally, your thoughts, deeds, and actions need to be aligned with good values. And this is where the concept of spiritual DNA I speak about in the book comes in. So if you really look at it, corporate karma and the value systems of an organization, the role of the CEO in allowing the people to build a value-based organization creates a good soil for people to flourish without negative pressures, without negative emotions. And maybe partly that's where the answer to corporate karma comes
in. Very, very interesting and very eloquent. So taking that in terms of spiritual CEO, how does a CEO who becomes more spiritual see more clearly his own corporate karma around him or her?
Okay.
We should say.
If you look at spirituality, there are several definitions that go around in the world. And I don't want to restrict spirituality based on any religious faith. In my view, that I've defined spirituality as which allows a person to be peaceful, happy, and allow him to grow in the dimensions that he wants to grow. You want to bring in Abraham Maslow of the fifth step of self-actualization. If you look at the entire world, as you rightly started in the beginning, we are all one. Technically, we are all one, but do we realize? See, you want to be peaceful, you want to be happy, you want to grow in a choice of dimension that you want to grow. I want to be peaceful, I want to be happy. But somewhere something is stopping us from allowing that to happen. We draw a simple line between two countries and call it a border, and then you have fights, wars, which last into eternity, as we are seeing in the Middle East right now. All these things can be very easy if we allow everyone the choice of being peaceful and happy. Two fundamental requisites for any human being. And the third one for economic factors or spiritual factors, the choice of allowing a person to grow into a dimension that he wants to grow. If you're able to do that, you can be considered to be a spiritual person, both for you, within your family, in your organization, for the country, for the world. And why I chose this topic as spiritual CEO is because CEOs are very powerful in one way because they land up influencing thousands and thousands of people in one go. And when they influence them on good values, good thinking, allowing proper growth, proper peace and happiness to settle, I do believe that we do a spiritual duty even without our knowledge. You don't need to be a guru, you don't need to be a person who creates a religion, you don't need to be a pastor or a minister or a Sufi saint. You can be spiritual silently by allowing people to be peaceful, happy, even within the small locality and community that you live. And this is exactly the values that I sort of want people to imbibe and practice through this book. It's a very small treatise, but this is what I brought out in the book, Mr. Mike.
I understand. I understand more. And it's actually very charmingly simple and clear. And thank you very much for the clarification.
Thank you.
I love the fact that you said quite clearly that spiritual nature is something that belongs to all of us. And we just need to understand that it actually is a part of us. Now, what we do with that is the intriguing part of the next chapter of the story. I'm sure you're thinking ahead. What would a spiritual CEO do within the next 10 years that would make you happy?
Okay. First, he has to make himself happy and all the stakeholders in the organization happy. Give them access to peace wherever they are, and find and nurture their growth into dimensions that they would want. See, some people want material growth. Some people want intellectual growth. Some people want artistic growth. They want to go ahead and express themselves. For example, my wife is a very good painter. And when I allow her and give her the space and time for her to draw brushes to whatever she wants on the canvas, she believes she's being allowed to grow. Very rarely what happens, almost always that happens in any organization, is when the CEO is all about being focused only on one aspect of growth, which is nothing but bringing more business and profits to the organization. So what happens is every person who joins the organization is only seen as a tool in making this one single-minded focus on profit as the only way in which we use people. We don't see them as people, we use them as commodities, tradable commodities. If they are not aligned to my larger goal of improvement in business and profit, because my paycheck is tied to that. Otherwise, I throw them out, hire and fire, as they call in American philosophy. Whereas a spiritual CEO looks at achieving these profits, but still allowing people to be grounded. Today, consciously or subconsciously, there are hundreds of organizations that I have studied, including the likes of Google, etc., where they allow a person complete freedom to decide what they want to do. And they have found out surprisingly that when you give that freedom to the people to be what they want to be, they surprisingly contribute more to the balance sheet and profit and loss account than you actually hold a gun, I mean a mental gun to their head, and say that you better do this. And this is what I would want the CEOs of the future, 5 years, 10 years from now, if possible even earlier, to see, because I've even started designing and I'm going to run a course on this book soon for the benefit of people, because with virtually you can reach anywhere in the world. When you transfer this knowledge as practical, applicable wisdom, I do see the potential of it happening sooner than later, maybe.
That's very, very interesting as well. And what I would say to that is, in my experience, as a country gains economic power and wealth, and the velocity curve of business increases because of that, it's then possible for the corporate governance structures to flourish. And then you actually do have intelligence employed within the human resources departments to actually affect change. If we take an instance of the railroads in America and how they grew up, that was a hard and nasty business. And actually railways in America didn't flourish in the same manner that they flourished in Japan, even though the Japanese railway system was a hard and nasty business. If we look at the topography of Japan and the topography of the United States, there are some clear indications why. you can't move mountains, but you can drill railroad tunnels.
Yeah.
So the Americans gravitated towards the automobile, and the Japanese also tried, but for the Japanese to build freeways was a mammoth task, because not very much of the land is actually flat.
Yeah.
The railways were threaded across the country. The congested freeways in America are nothing compared to the congested tollways in Japan, and the tollways in Japan are expensive. So you have a choice. You can travel easily and quickly and swiftly by Shinkansen in Japan, or you can pay rather expensive tolls and spend an unknown quantity of time on those routes. And you also have to drive yourself. So yeah, I've seen that evolution, the railroad, freeway, railroad in Japan, and we do call them expressways here, but they are far from expressways. But in America, they are still freeways. There are no tolls. Obviously, there are taxes, vehicle taxes. I think the UK does it the same way with a vehicle tax. The motorways in the UK are supported by a vehicle tax. Although we've seen changes in London now, where if you drive a vehicle into the center of the city, you are forced to pay for that privilege. So, rolling all of that back into getting back to spiritual CEO, there are lots of different roads we can travel, or ways in which we can transport ourselves. And we must choose the right vehicle for the terrain. Why am I talking about that? Why am I saying that? Because it's evident that there has been an evolution of wealth in certain countries, and therefore the velocity of business in certain countries is faster. And so those countries can afford to let their human resource development flower. The west coast of the United States has traditionally been more liberal. It's the place where people ran away from the hard weather of the East Coast to the sunshine of the West Coast. And when they arrived there, they had better weather, and perhaps they had more time to think about how to grow ecosystems that were more caring for humans. That's my perception of the initial stages of the Silicon Valley computer companies that have flourished into very, very wealthy social media platforms. The ethos of the social media platforms themselves has also been that open connectivity, an amplification of the basic internet, the freedoms of that network. So we went from railways, which is a network which didn't work very well in the United States, but did work very well in Japan. And then we went from freeways and airways and all of that. All of those are networks. And now we have the internet, which is allowing us not to get on a plane, not to use that airway network, but to use a virtualized transportation system, where I can instantly be in India with you, or you can instantly be in Japan with me. And we hopefully can encourage more younger people, if they watch this video, to say, wow, I'm actually living at a time where I don't have to fight to get on a plane. I'm actually living at a time where I don't have to drive a car on a freeway. I don't have to get on an airplane. I don't have to travel to physically interact with somebody. I can intellectually interact with more people.
Yes.
Maybe I can increase the velocity of business in my country. Maybe that we can grow human resources within other countries that are more heartful.
Yeah.
So if that's my synthesis of what I've seen in terms of the evolution of countries' ability to grow companies that can care for humans. Because if you're starting a brick factory in a underdeveloped country, and you need bricks, everyone needs bricks, you're likely to use child labor. You're likely to use the labor that you can find. You're likely to get everyone to help you. And maybe they do on a family basis when the company is younger. But that demand for labor, it's a very labor-intensive business, building bricks. It's a fuel-intensive business. It's hot. It's difficult. It's tiring. It's heavy. All of those things are something that we can't transcend, because that business is truly a brick and mortar business. Probably less mortar, but lots of bricks. I can't imagine the human resources company in that company. When I talk about the company, I mean the department, because company means a group of friends. Calm, together, pani, friends, company. A friend was your business partner when companies first started. If we talk about a company of HR professionals at that brick company, there's very little they can do, given the economics of that business, to raise up the people at the bottom of that pyramid. Perhaps we don't need so many brick factories in the future. Do we need cities then? Can I ask you that question? What advice would you give to a spiritual CEO about his real estate needs post 2020 and the pandemic of coronavirus and the disease COVID-19 that we're all very afraid of?
Yeah, we have a few more minutes, I think, for the Zoom to shut off, so we'll wind it up quickly. But I see a situation where spiritual CEOs will move towards need-based communities, need-based organizations instead of want-based, which is currently what has been there pre-pandemic. And for that, the mindset change is something which is essential, which a spiritual CEO will bring about. In a nutshell, that's the answer I would like to give you.
So needs versus wants. We don't need a gold-plated boardroom.
Exactly.
We do need a communal space for staff to meet physically at certain times, to build mentorship and to exchange intellectual ideas at a much more rapid pace in a group than could be possible with the kind of hierarchy that we're starting to see occur on Zoom calls. Where very senior people speak more than the junior people.
All that will get leveled up, I think. Zoom has taught us a lot. Zoom and other virtual platforms have taught us a lot. Meetings are getting more collaborative, more creative, need-based than want-based. People are spending what they're supposed to spend in their life, not too much, not extravagant lifestyle and things like that. So some of the thoughts which I have echoed in the book have already sort of started coming true. Of course, this is only the beginning. And maybe the conversation that we have is also happening at a time where we are going through the second wave in the world. And we do understand that now we are more grounded than the first time when we didn't know what was hitting us. I think now people are ready to see these changes, accept, maybe process faster than what it was a year back. So in fact, I would only say that this conversation, hope that it reaches a lot of people on either side, which will benefit in my opinion, for sure. With your knowledge and expertise of being in Japan, with a British background and getting grounded there, understanding Japanese culture is a very rich culture. I read a lot, though I haven't traveled there. And I hope that this knowledge and wisdom does travel far and wide and let people be helped in the process of becoming a spiritual CEO.
Well, I hope so too. I am really looking forward to reading The Spiritual CEO.
I will arrange
the yellow book behind you.
Yeah, yeah.
And I want to ask you this. What's the title of the next book?
Technically, I'm not supposed to disclose it, but it will be a sequel to this because I have signed a contract with Amazon Worldwide Publications, and I'm not supposed to disclose for as per the contract. But there is a sequel coming, which will be in line with this book, which will be more deeper into some aspects I haven't been able to touch in this book yet. It's still work in progress, maybe another year max. Same time next year.
Well, I'll come back, Prakash. If you invite me, Prakash, I will come back in a year.
Yeah, why not? I mean, we should be in touch more often. Why wait for a year? Now we know each other. We have the contacts. We are going to be on WhatsApp and LinkedIn and all that. See, great minds will have to work together to create great hearts, and that's the way forward for the world.
I will send you a gift of one of my art pieces.
That would be wonderful. Really wonderful.
After this call.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mike. We'll soon have it put on YouTube, and I'll send you the link. Let's see that it reaches as many people as possible. And I will also get the book to you as soon as possible once the lockdown opens everywhere.
That's extremely kind of you, sir.
Thank you. And say hi to your family, to your wife, your children, your wonderful grandchildren. My love to all of them from this side of the world. Still, we are going to meet again and again. But for this recording, let's say bye-bye and thanks a lot for being there. Thank you.
Yes. Goodbye, everyone. Namaste.